The story starts on a normal morning inside one of the cheap apartments where Minjun lives. Judging by the state of his room and his computer, the kid clearly spent the entire night gaming. His computer is still running while he sleeps like nothing in the world can wake him up until the alarm clock starts ringing. Like every alarm clock ever created, the thing is unbelievably annoying. So he forces himself to grab his phone and turn it off, since school is waiting for him whether he likes it or not. He drags himself out of bed while still half asleep. When he enters the kitchen, he spots a note from his mother on the fridge, explaining that she has already left for work, meaning he has to handle the rest of the morning alone. After getting ready, Minjun leaves the dim apartment and walks through the rough neighborhood he calls home. While making his way down the street, his eyes drift toward the luxurious high-rise building standing in front of him. The place looks like something straight out of a rich protagonist's backstory, while he is stuck trying to survive on the starter pack version of life. It is obvious he envies the teenagers living there, but staring at expensive buildings is not going to change anything. So he keeps moving and heads towards his high school. Sadly, school is not much better, as almost immediately Minjun ends up getting picked on by the usual group of bullies who seem to treat bothering him like a daily quest. Leading the group is Park Sung-bin, an 18-year-old student from Class 3 in his second year. As Sung-bin keeps mocking him, a voice suddenly cuts through the hallway and makes everyone stop. The owner of that voice is Han Yena, another 18-year-old from Class 3, followed by a group of friends who trail behind her like loyal background characters. Yena is clearly unimpressed by Sung-bin's behavior. Even though she also thinks Minjun is pathetic, she believes Sung-bin is making the school look bad. The moment Sung-bin sees her, his entire personality changes. Suddenly, he starts acting friendly and treats Minjun like some harmless class pet. Even then, Han Yena sticks to her point, saying that Sung-bin is causing unnecessary chaos in the halls and ruining the school's image. And if he wants to act like a troublemaker, he should do it outside school grounds. Sung-bin quickly fires back by pointing out that Han Yena probably dislikes Minjun more than anyone else. Han Yena responds by saying that she has never physically hurt him, she only ignores him, unlike Sung-bin. It turns out Han Yena and Minjun have been classmates since middle school. Trying to change the topic, Sung-bin invites Han Yena to meet a new friend, but she rejects the offer immediately. Apparently, the last time she agreed to hang out with him, he brought her to Minjun's basement, which, according to her, is creepy as hell. Because of that disaster, she has no intention of repeating the experience. The reason Han Yena has such ridiculously high standards is simple. She lives in the same luxury apartment complex that Minjun was staring at earlier. Her parents are successful professionals. She is popular on social media, admired by students across the school, and performs exceptionally well in class. There are even rumors that she will move to the United States next year to continue her studies. From the outside, Han Yena looks like someone with a perfect life, good grades, good looks, popularity, and a future that already seems planned out. However, she has one flaw that stands out above everything else. She absolutely cannot stand poor and weak guys. Unfortunately for Minjun, he fits that description perfectly. Back in 8th grade, he finally gathered enough courage to talk to her, hoping things would go well. But instead, she responded with nothing but annoyance and disgust. To her, he was just an awkward kid who kept showing up everywhere like a side character refusing to leave the story. Even though their homes were along the same route, she hated walking beside him and eventually told him to take a different path so she would not have to deal with his smell. That moment made everything painfully clear to Minjun that she genuinely hated him. Speaking of smells, Minjun always noticed that Han Yena smells surprisingly nice. At this point, he is convinced that a pleasant fragrance is probably another unfair perk that comes with being rich. Normally, after getting humiliated and rejected that many times, anyone would start disliking the person responsible. Minjun, however, is built differently as his feelings never change. No matter how badly Han Yena treats him, he keeps sitting beside her and keeps following the same routine. Every year brings the same school, the same classroom, and the same one-sided crush. Even after countless insults, he refuses to move on. Sometimes he even questions his own sanity, but sadly, that is just his reality. Bullied by Sung-bin and emotionally crushed by Han Yena, Minjun lives the life of a lonely dumbass loser. Later, Minjun hangs out with his only 2 friends. As expected, the conversation quickly turns into anime talk, because both of them are massive otakus. The chubby one, Byung-jun, seems completely obsessed, while the skinny one, Bae Soon-ho, admits that he has not been keeping up with recent series. Both Bae Soon-ho and Byung-jun are 18 years old, although they attend different classes from Min-jun. Despite that, they are the closest thing he has to real friends. The biggest difference between them is that they are not constantly targeted by bullies. Watching them live relatively normal lives makes Min-jun feel unbelievably jealous. In his mind, they are simply luckier. But before he can sink deeper into those thoughts, his friends ask whether he wants to join them at a concert. The idol on the screen certainly catches their attention, but Min-jun barely reacts. Naturally, his friends think he is wasting a golden opportunity, and as they leave, they continue joking about how depressed he looks. Later in class, Min-jun spends most of his time wishing the day would end. Then he overhears Sung-bin and his crew talking about another student. Apparently, they recently tried intimidating a guy who stared right back at them without flinching. The student in question is Hak Chol, someone who recently arrived from North Korea. Unfortunately for them, Hak Chol arrives just in time to hear every word, and unlike most students, Hak Chol is not intimidated by Sung-bin in the slightest. Sung-bin's pride takes a direct hit when Hak Chol looks at him like he is completely irrelevant. Annoyed, Sung-bin grabs him by the collar, expecting some kind of reaction, but instead, Hak Chol remains perfectly calm. Eventually, Sung-bin lets go, although not before throwing out a threat. After school, Min-jun walks home while drowning in his own thoughts. At this stage, dropping out feels like the only solution left. He convinces himself that he is finished with school forever, but unfortunately, fate has other plans. On the way home, Sung-bin and his gang suddenly cross paths with him. Strangely enough, they seem delighted to see him, and Sung-bin demands cigarettes and orders Min-jun to ask a nearby woman to buy them from a convenience store since they are too young to purchase them themselves. Min-jun instantly recognizes this for what it is, another excuse to humiliate him. This time, however, he has reached his limit, and instead of obeying, he ignores them and keeps walking, making Sung-bin furious. Moments later, he and his crew attack Min-jun and drag him to an abandoned construction site. The beating becomes brutal as they continue taking their frustration out on him. They hope the punishment teaches him obedience, but Min-jun finally snaps. Completely broken, he tells Sung-bin to stop holding back because he no longer cares what happens to him. Rather than shocking Sung-bin into silence, the response only makes him even angrier. After one final attack, Sung-bin leaves with the others, although not before making one last threat involving Min-jun's mother. By the time dawn begins creeping across the horizon, Min-jun finally drags himself away from the construction site, and the only thing occupying his mind is the wish that the entire world would disappear before tomorrow arrives. Deep down, he knows that will never happen. Because of that, another idea starts forming as he decides to climb the luxury apartment complex he has stared at for years and put an end to everything. On the way there, he unexpectedly runs into Han Yena. As usual, she becomes irritated the moment she sees him and demands to know why he is wandering around a place where he clearly does not live. Eventually, she notices the bruises covering his face and starts questioning what happened. Even while criticizing him, she sounds annoyed that he never stands up for himself. After listening to her complain for a while, Min-jun simply turns around and walks away. Han Yena gets frustrated because he ignores her, but eventually gives up and decides to deal with him later. Returning home, Min-jun enters his cramped apartment, turns on his computer, and escapes into video games. While fighting through endless waves of zombies, he reflects on everything that happened and concludes that Han Yena is right about one thing. He truly is pathetic. He plans to quit school tomorrow, find a job, and help his mother instead. Hours pass, and he continues gaming until his online friends suddenly announce that they are logging off. Confused, Min-jun realizes that it is 10 at night. That is when they remind him about the breaking news, which shows that some kind of outbreak is spreading outside. Almost immediately, he hears a disturbance beyond his front door. Curious, he approaches it just as someone starts pounding against it. Looking through the peephole, he recognizes one of his upstairs neighbors begging to be let inside. Assuming the man is drunk again, Min-jun unlocks the door without thinking. The first thing Min-jun notices is the blood covering the man's entire body, along with a massive wound stretching across his stomach. Even then, Minjun assumes that the man has simply been injured and briefly considers calling emergency services. Unfortunately, that idea disappears the moment the man lets out an unnatural scream and launches himself forward. Panic immediately takes over as Minjun struggles with him, but Minjun finally manages to kick the man away. Minjun quickly slams the door shut before locking it. His heart pounds so hard that it feels ready to burst from his chest. His breathing becomes heavy and uneven while his legs shake uncontrollably. Without wasting another second, he grabs his phone and tries calling the police, but there is no connection. Instead, his screen fills with emergency alerts and reports mentioning unknown attacks occurring across multiple regions, while authorities urge everyone to remain indoors until further notice. Before he can fully process the warning, loud noises erupt somewhere above his basement apartment. Curious and terrified at the same time, he carefully opens the window just enough to look outside. The scene waiting for him is pure chaos as people are attacking each other throughout the street. Among the madness, he even spots his neighbor wandering around outside and causing even more destruction. Seeing all these immediately makes him think of his mother. He tries calling her without hesitation, but there is still no signal, and no matter how many times he tries, nothing goes through. As darkness settles over the city, Minjun turns off every light in the apartment and curls up beneath a blanket in the corner of his room. He keeps trying to connect to a network, hoping for some kind of update, but every attempt fails. Eventually, he turns on the television, desperate to learn what is happening, and the news anchor reports multiple violent incidents taking place throughout the country. According to the broadcast, unidentified civilians are responsible for a growing number of attacks, while the government currently classifies the situation as widespread terrorism. Investigations are underway, but nobody seems to know what is actually causing it. Citizens are instructed to stay home, lock all doors and windows, and avoid unnecessary contact with anyone outside. The next report only makes things worse as more cities are falling into chaos. Similar incidents are being reported not only in major locations, but across smaller regions as well. Police and military forces are being deployed, yet the outbreak already seems beyond anyone's control. From everything Minjun has heard, it sounds as though zombies have somehow become real. The idea is ridiculous because things like that belong in video games, anime, and movies, and are not supposed to appear outside someone's front door. Yet every piece of evidence in front of him points toward exactly that. Wanting answers, he decides sitting around inside the apartment is not going to help. So he leaves his room and heads toward the building's main entrance, hoping to secure it before anything gets inside. Before opening the door, he carefully checks through the peephole to make sure the hallway is clear. Seeing no immediate danger, he steps outside and slowly climbs toward the ground floor. An eerie silence surrounds the building. There are no voices, no conversations, and no signs of normal life. When he finally reaches the main entrance and peeks outside, he immediately spots one of the infected figures wandering through the street. Without hesitation, he closes the door and locks every bolt available. His next thought is checking whether anyone else in the building survived, but the silence is so unsettling that he decides against it, as he believes that the police or military will arrive eventually. Returning to his apartment, he turns the television back on and waits for another update, but unfortunately, before any useful information appears, the transmission suddenly cuts off. Left with no other options, he lies down and attempts to sleep, but sleep never comes. More than fear, there is a strange feeling growing inside him. Just yesterday, he wanted his life to end because the world felt unbearably cruel. Now, that wish almost seems to have come true. The more he thinks about it, the more he realizes that nothing has truly changed. Life was already hell before the outbreak, and it remains hell now. Because of that, the end of the world does not terrify him as much as it probably should, as he was already about as miserable as a person could get. Morning eventually arrives and reveals a city that barely resembles the one from yesterday. Abandoned cars fill the streets while infected people wander aimlessly through the roads. Minjun carefully opens the building's main entrance and takes a cautious look outside. Immediately, something feels wrong as the air itself seems different. A strong smell of blood hangs over everything, so intense that he instantly shuts the door and locks it again. Going outside without preparation would be a terrible idea, so he returns to the kitchen and begins checking his supplies. Thankfully, he has more food than expected, which should keep him going for roughly 2 weeks, and he also has 3 bottles of water. Better yet, the tap still works, and the gas remains available. If he manages everything carefully, he can probably survive close to a month. Hopefully, that gives rescue teams enough time to restore order. Still, none of that eases his biggest concern about his mother's safety. With no network connection, there is no way to know whether she is safe, and all he can do is hope for the best. Minjun remembers something important about 5 different families living in this building, and one of those residents is a college student renting the rooftop room. The guy has a reputation for constantly bringing his girlfriend over every Tuesday, and since yesterday happened to be Tuesday, there is a chance both of them are still trapped upstairs. Gathering every bit of courage he has left, Minjun begins climbing through the building. He checks each apartment one by one, but finds no sign of life, and eventually, only the rooftop remains. While climbing the final stairs, he quietly hopes the couple manage to survive. Strangely, the rooftop door stands wide open, and when he reaches the top, he notices the student's room is open as well. Curious and concerned, he steps inside. Across the room lies the girlfriend, already gone, while the college student has become one of those flesh-hungry zombies. Fortunately, Minjun never gets a clear look at the body itself because it remains outside his direct line of sight, and the only thing he can properly see is the ridiculous amount of blood covering the room. There is so much of it that he immediately hesitates. Because of that, he quickly abandons any plans of exploring the apartment further. Unfortunately, while trying to back away as quietly as possible, he accidentally bumps into a flower pot. The thing crashes to the floor and instantly shatters the silence. The sound echoes through the room and immediately grabs the zombie's attention. The moment he hears an angry growl coming from inside, Minjun turns around and runs. At that point, Minjun moves faster than anyone would expect from someone who spends most of his life gaming indoors. Sadly, panic and coordination are not exactly best friends. His foot catches awkwardly, and he nearly loses his balance. At the same moment, the zombie bursts out of the room and throws itself toward him, but fortunately, Minjun reacts just in time. Instead of trying to overpower the creature, he uses its own momentum against it as he ducks beneath the attack. He lets the zombie fly right over him and then gives it a hard shove. The creature loses its balance completely and tumbles off the rooftop. Everything happens so quickly that Minjun barely processes. For several seconds, he simply stands there, staring. Then his legs finally give out, and he drops to his knees. His entire body feels drained. The encounter lasts only moments, but it leaves him exhausted. Without wasting another second, he rushes back downstairs, locks the entrance behind him, and barricades himself inside the apartment once again. Even after getting back safely, his mind struggles to catch up with reality. He still cannot fully accept what just happened. He thinks about the fact that the guy he thought might be alive had become one of those monsters. And even worse, Minjun is the one who sent him falling from the rooftop. That thought weighs heavily on him, and no matter how much he tries to justify it, the guilt refuses to disappear. He keeps replaying the scene in his head and argues that he had no choice since it was self-defense. If he had hesitated for even a second, he might have been the one lying dead on the pavement instead. Eventually, another night arrives, and just like the previous one, Minjun spends it trapped inside the dark basement apartment. The silence feels heavier than ever, and while sitting alone, he keeps thinking about the rooftop incident. The guilt continues chewing away at him from the inside. Eventually, he gets up and heads toward the entrance as part of him wants confirmation that what happened was real. Looking outside, he immediately spots a zombie standing nearby, and when the creature slowly turns around, Minjun notices its neck hanging at a horrible angle over one shoulder. The sight instantly tells him everything he needs to know. This is a college student. Oddly enough, seeing him again fills Minjun with two completely opposite emotions. On one hand, he feels relieved because the student is still moving around, and on the other hand, the sight is terrifying because the person standing there is no longer human. Quietly, Minjun apologizes in his mind before shutting the door again. That moment helps him reach an important conclusion, that these infected people are gone. By the time the next morning arrives, it marks the 3rd day since the apocalypse began. Minjun starts the day by preparing a meal using the cooker. He deliberately chooses foods that require cooking first since the gas is still working, and once those supplies run out, he can rely on packaged food. Even while eating, one thought continues to bother him. He cannot afford to sit around waiting forever because if rescue never comes and the food runs out first, he is finished. At least there is one positive development, as far as Minjun knows. The building is now free of zombies. The rooftop student was the only infected resident, and he is no longer inside. That thought gives Minjun a small boost of confidence as he begins considering ways to attract attention from rescue teams or survivors. Maybe he could light a fire on the rooftop, or maybe he could even leave the building and search for help himself. After all, only a few days ago, he had already given up on life completely. If something happens to him now, it almost feels easier to accept. Besides, he has already survived 2 life or death encounters, and those experiences have given him confidence he never had before. Suddenly, his phone starts ringing, and the sound nearly makes him jump as it is his mother. His mother sounds worried and immediately asks whether he is safe, as Minjun reassures her that he is still at home and asks where she ended up. She explains that during the evacuation 2 days earlier, she managed to reach military personnel and was taken to a shelter in Songnam. Hearing that instantly lifts a massive weight from his shoulders, and she tells him not to worry and promises she will ask the rescue teams to come for him. Unfortunately, before they can talk much longer, the call suddenly drops. Even so, Minjun cannot stop smiling, as simply hearing her voice is enough. A short while later, more notifications begin appearing on his phone. This time, the messages come from his 2 otaku friends, and if they are texting, that means they survived too. Somehow, those 2 are still joking around despite the apocalypse unfolding outside. Since they live close to each other, Minjun figures they probably teamed up and helped one another. Besides his friends and his mother, however, there is one other person he finds himself thinking about. That person being Hanyina, as out of everyone he knows, she lives the closest. He remembers the day Songbin and his crew practically took over his apartment. One of them invited Hanyina without telling her where they were going. The moment Minjun heard she was coming, he completely panicked. When Hanyina arrived and saw the tiny apartment, her expression changed. The smell of cigarettes hung in the air while the floor looked sticky and neglected. She did not even bother stepping inside. Instead, she simply turned around and left. At the time, Minjun felt completely crushed. It was not Songbin's behavior that hurt the most, but it was the look on Hanyina's face. And even now, the memory remains painfully clear. While sitting in the bathroom, lost in thought, he wonders whether she survived. Realistically, she is probably fine, as her father runs a hospital and her family has resources most people could only dream of. If anyone has a chance of reaching safety, it should be her. Suddenly, a familiar voice reaches his ears, and instantly, his body tenses. The voice is coming from outside, and looking through the window, he discovers someone he never expected to see, being Hanyina. She is calling for him while trying to keep her voice down, but her panic makes that impossible. Unfortunately, the noise attracts nearby zombies, and several immediately start moving toward her. The confident girl who always looked down on everyone suddenly appears terrified. Desperate, she begs him to open the door, and Minjun does not hesitate. He unlocks the entrance, pulls her inside, and quickly secures it again. The moment she enters, he notices how shaken she is. Sweat covers her face, and no amount of deep breathing seems capable of calming her down. Then something even stranger happens. Hanyina suddenly looks up, spots Minjun properly, and grabs the front of his shirt. She seems completely dazed. Before he can even react, she presses her face against his chest and clings to him tightly. Her hand refuses to let go of his clothes, as though she is desperately searching for safety. Meanwhile, Minjun sits there completely stunned, confused beyond belief. He can only wonder what in the world happened to make Hanyina act like this. Looking at the room from a wider angle, both of them are still sitting on the floor, while Hanyina continues holding on to Minjun. The sight feels almost unreal considering how their relationship has been for years. Concerned, Minjun asks once again whether she is all right, and little by little, Hanyina loosens her grip on his shirt and starts regaining control of her emotions. After taking a moment to calm herself, she raises her head and thanks him for helping her. She admits that if he had not opened the door when he did, things could have ended very badly for her. Hearing that makes Minjun feel awkward, but also relieved. He scratches his head and tells her that it is fine now because she is finally safe. And for a brief moment, the room falls silent. Then Hanyina slowly looks around the apartment with a much more serious expression than usual. She asks whether it is really just him living there right now. He explains that his mother left for work 3 days ago and never returned home, although he recently managed to contact her. He also tells her that thankfully, she is safe with the military at a shelter. Hanyina nods after hearing that and says she is glad things worked out that way. Since the topic has already come up, Minjun decides to ask about her parents and whether they are safe too. The question immediately causes a slight hesitation. For a second, it looks like she wants to say something important about her mother, but she quickly changes course and simply claims that both of them are fine. Instead of continuing that conversation, she asks for water. According to her, she has barely had anything to drink for days. Nearby, a wall clock reveals that it is already close to 3 in the morning. The moment Hanyina gets hold of the water, she starts drinking like someone who has just crossed a desert, as bottle after bottle disappears at an alarming speed. Watching her nearly makes Minjun panic as he knows they are supposed to ration supplies, because if the water ever stops running, they could end up in serious trouble. Even so, he decides not to say anything, as whatever she went through to reach this place clearly was not easy. Looking at her exhausted face, he figures she probably risked her life just getting here. Curious, he awkwardly asks whether she came directly from her apartment. More importantly, he wants to know why she chose his apartment out of all places. The answer catches him completely off guard. According to Hanyina, she was not at home at all. In fact, she has been trapped outside ever since the outbreak started. Yena begins explaining that everything traces back to 3 days earlier, the same day she crossed paths with Minjun. After returning home, something happened that forced her to leave again, and then the entire world suddenly fell apart. She remembers hearing screams everywhere as people started running through the streets in complete panic, moving without direction or purpose. Nobody understood what was happening, and during the chaos, she ended up hiding near the staircase of a shopping mall. At first, she believed rescue teams would eventually arrive, but hours passed. Then, an entire day passed, but nobody came. Shocked, Minjun asks whether she spent all that time alone. She continues saying that thankfully, she eventually discovered an unlocked door near the staircase. Behind it was a small meeting room. With nowhere else to go, she hid there and waited. By pure luck, there happened to be a single bottle of water inside, and that tiny bit of luck was enough to keep her going. Unfortunately, surviving on almost nothing eventually became impossible. By the 3rd day, both hunger and thirst had reached their limit. Hanyana knew she could not remain hidden any longer. Gathering her courage, she finally left the room and attempted to return home. The moment she stepped outside, she was greeted by a horrifying sight. The streets were filled with fallen people, while others wandered around in strange ways. Even now, recalling the memory makes her expression darken. She wonders why she had to take such a dangerous route. Still, she had no choice, as the only path available was a narrow alley that looked anything but safe. Slowly and carefully, she moved through it while avoiding the infected. That path eventually brought her closer to Minjun's neighborhood. The area felt somewhat familiar because she had visited it before, although not under the best circumstances. To reach her own apartment building, she would have needed to pass through a much more dangerous section of the city. Given the situation, that option felt impossible. As she continued sneaking through the streets, Hanyana started recognizing landmarks around Minjun's neighborhood, and eventually, a thought crossed her mind. With nowhere else to go and no better plan available, she decided to head toward his apartment. According to her, she spent the entire journey avoiding the strange people roaming around outside. Somehow, she managed to slip past them and eventually reach the building. The moment she realized she had actually made it, a huge sense of relief washed over her. Sitting there now, she admits that finding Minjun at home felt like the best possible outcome. Hearing everything she went through leaves Minjun genuinely impressed. He praises her courage because venturing outside during all this madness takes far more bravery than he expected. Hanyana lets out a tired sigh and admits she is simply relieved to be alive. Her hair is a complete mess, sweat covers her face, and her clothes are noticeably damp from the journey. Looking completely exhausted, she asks once again whether there is still enough water left in the apartment. Minjun simply stares at Hanyana with a thoughtful expression. Looking at her closely, he notices just how much she has been sweating and casually asks whether she wants to change clothes. The question catches her completely off guard. For a brief moment, her face turns slightly red before annoyance immediately takes over. Calling him crazy, she gives him a light kick and tells him he deserved that. far too exhausted to keep arguing. She changes the subject and asks whether the water is still working, and if it is, she wants to take a shower. Feeling awkward, Minjun quickly agrees and tells her to go ahead. Haenyana thanks him before heading toward the bathroom. Left alone, Minjun remains seated in silence, wondering how his life somehow ended up like this. Not long afterward, the bathroom door closes behind her. Alone in the living room, Minjun finds himself staring in that direction. His thoughts begin drifting toward the future. Before Haenyana arrived, he had been seriously considering leaving the building, but now things are different as he cannot exactly leave her behind. Food becomes another problem entirely as the supplies he carefully counted were only enough for one person. With Haenyana here, everything is effectively cut in half. The more he thinks about it, the more hopeless the situation seems. Even so, another thought keeps distracting him. The fact that Haenyana is currently taking a shower inside his apartment still feels completely unreal. Back at school, he spent years walking through hallways alone while she barely acknowledged his existence. Whenever he tried approaching her, she usually ignored him without hesitation, and most of the time she acted as though he was some annoying insect that happened to be nearby. A while later, the bathroom door finally opens. Haenyana steps out wearing lighter clothes, immediately catching Minjun by surprise. She explains that she needs to wash her current clothes and asks whether she can borrow something to wear in the meantime. Instantly nervous, Minjun starts searching through his belongings while Haenyana casually tells him that anything will do. After a bit of searching, he hands her a gray t-shirt, and the whole situation leaves him strangely embarrassed. Unfortunately, Haenyana takes one sniff of the shirt and immediately complains about the smell. She asks whether he has another one, but Minjun can only stand there awkwardly while she inspects the shirt again. Clearly, she is not a fan of the scent, but even so, after a moment, she reluctantly decides to wear it until her own clothes dry. She suggests that some kind of spray might help. Minjun attempts to defend himself, but Haenyana insists that the apartment smell is the real problem. Apparently, her nose is far too sensitive for this place. A little later, Haenyana calls out to him. Slightly surprised, Minjun looks over. The remains of their meal are still sitting on the table between them. Haenyana asks what exactly they are supposed to do now. In response, Minjun admits that before she arrived, he had been thinking about moving somewhere else the next day. The confession instantly shocks her as she asks whether he has completely lost his mind. According to her, leaving makes absolutely no sense when they already have food and shelter. She points out that she barely survived getting here in the first place and has no desire to repeat the experience. Seeing her reaction, Minjun quickly explains that it was only an idea from before she arrived, and it is not a current plan. Now that she is here, he agrees that staying put and waiting for rescue is probably the best option. Haenyana seems satisfied until another problem enters the conversation. What happens when the food eventually runs out? Sitting across from each other, she refuses to let the issue go, and Minjun thinks for a moment before admitting that the only way to extend their survival would be searching other apartments or nearby buildings for supplies. The problem is that neither of them knows how dangerous the outside world truly is. He does mention that the screams coming from surrounding buildings have become less frequent lately. Then a troubling thought crosses his mind that if their food completely runs out, they will have no choice but to leave. The moment those words leave his mouth, Haenyana quickly stands up and rejects the idea entirely. Minjun reminds her that staying hidden forever is not realistic, and eventually, supplies will disappear. She argues that they should worry about that problem when it actually arrives. Clearly agitated, she points out that he has barely spent any time outside and does not understand how terrifying it is. The discussion naturally shifts toward the infected as Haenyana confirms that, from everything she witnessed, those people behave exactly like zombies. Sitting back down, Minjun agrees that they still need more information, but based on what he has seen, anyone who gets bitten seems to become one of them. Then, with a distant look in his eyes, he casually admits something surprising, that honestly, he does not even care that much about getting infected. The statement catches Haenyana off guard immediately. To her, it sounds like he believes he has nothing worth protecting. Ignoring that reaction, Minjun continues explaining his observations. The key to avoiding the zombies seems to be avoiding direct contact. After all, Haenyana managed to make it all the way to his apartment. She even admitted that the infected only noticed her near the very end of the journey. According to him, not every infected person behaves the same way. Some wander around slowly, while others barely move at all due to their injuries. More importantly, most of them appear slower than a normal person running. Based on that, Minjun concludes that avoiding them entirely might actually be possible. Henyana falls silent for a moment while considering his reasoning. Trying to lighten the mood a little, Minjun suddenly asks whether she ever played tag as a child. The random question leaves her completely confused. Smiling slightly, he suggests treating the infected like players in a giant game of tag, and maybe dodging them could even become a little exciting. Henyana immediately shuts down the comparison. As far as she is concerned, there is nothing fun about any of this. She reminds him that she is being completely serious about how frightened she feels. Eventually, she decides she has had enough conversation for one night. Announcing that she wants to sleep, she asks whether he can find some blankets, as, according to her, she has not enjoyed a proper night's rest in days, and exhaustion is finally catching up to her. The sleeping arrangements quickly become their next problem. At first, Henyana reacts in disbelief when Minjun suggests sleeping nearby. She asks whether he has completely lost his mind and points toward a distant corner, telling him to sleep over there instead. Feeling awkward, Minjun points out that the apartment is tiny and sleeping directly in front of the bathroom is a bit excessive. After letting out a sigh, Henyana reluctantly admits he has a point as Minjun offers a different solution. He says she can take the comfortable spot while he sleeps somewhere less convenient. The suggestion surprises her as he even jokes that he can always sleep on the stairs if necessary. Unfortunately, Henyana briefly seems willing to accept that idea, causing Minjun to abandon it immediately. Before long, a ridiculous argument breaks out over who gets the better sleeping spot. At one point, he even suggests sleeping in the kitchen. That idea also disappears once he realizes Henyana is considering it seriously. In the end, Minjun loses the debate completely and ends up lying on an improvised bed in the kitchen. Resigned to his fate, he reflects that this is somehow how he ends up sleeping alone on the floor. At least he is still inside the apartment, but deep down he quietly appreciates the fact that he is no longer by himself, even if Henyana talks far more than he expected. Nearby, the front entrance remains heavily barricaded with boxes and layers of tape for extra security. A single candle provides the only source of light, casting long shadows across the dark living room. Meanwhile, Henyana lies awake in the more comfortable sleeping area. Henyana quietly invites him to come sleep closer to her. The confession that follows catches him completely off guard. She admits that being alone is frightening. Henyana cannot relax. Too many thoughts are running through her head. Fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion all keep her awake. She insists that he come over. More honestly than before, she admits that she does not want to spend the night alone because she is genuinely scared. After a moment of hesitation, Minjun accepts Henyana's earlier invitation and now sits against the bedroom wall inside the apartment. The atmosphere between them feels quieter than before, almost heavier in a different way. Breaking the silence, Henyana mentions a strange sound she has heard multiple times while hiding outside. With her back turned slightly away from him, she murmurs softly that she misses her mother. Her voice is lower than usual, almost fragile. Sitting on the floor nearby, Minjun listens without interrupting, simply taking in the rare moment of honesty from her. As the night slowly drags on, exhaustion finally takes over and Henyana manages to fall into a deep sleep. When morning arrives, sunlight creeps into the room and Minjun quietly watches her sleeping figure. For a moment, he wonders how long she will remain asleep. It feels ironic to him that she is sleeping so peacefully now, especially after insisting earlier that she was too scared to close her eyes at all. A clock on the wall shows that it is 9 in the morning, confirming that the day has already fully begun for him. After a while, Henyana slowly stirs awake. She sits up on the makeshift bed, still half drowsy, and notices Minjun getting ready near the door. Her expression immediately changes into one filled with questions. Confused, she asks where he's going while watching him put on his jacket. Calmly, Minjun explains that he plans to go back to the rooftop to check the situation again. The moment she hears that, Henyana immediately scolds him and reminds him that there could still be infected up there. Minjun reassures her that he will be careful and avoid unnecessary danger. Then, almost casually, he asks if she wants to come with him. Without hesitation, she calls him crazy and refuses outright. Accepting her answer, Minjun decides to go alone and tells her to stay behind and wait. Determined, he leaves the apartment and starts climbing the stairs toward the rooftop. As he moves upward, his focus sharpens, glancing back toward the door. At that moment, he notices a small crack forming in the reinforced glass. A wave of concern crosses his mind, but it is still glass after all, and glass can only hold for so long. Worried about the building's safety, he continues climbing, this time more cautiously, checking each floor along the way. While ascending, a strange and unpleasant smell begins to fill the air. Something is definitely wrong up there. Hinata follows close behind him, commenting that she has a very bad feeling about this. Minjun does not respond immediately, but his expression tightens. He agrees silently that something unpleasant may have happened. Eventually, they reach the rooftop access door. This place once felt calm during the daytime, but now it feels completely different. Minjun carefully peeks inside and instantly freezes. The moment he sees the scene in the small room, his body goes still. Cold sweat runs down his face as he processes what is in front of him. Lying on the floor is the girlfriend of the rooftop tenant, completely motionless. It is clear that she did not survive, standing there in silence. Minjun quietly decides that the least he can do is offer a brief prayer for her. With a heavy feeling in his chest, he steps back from the entrance, leaving the room in silence. Hinata asks cautiously if anyone is inside. Minjun confirms, but tells her that the person is already gone. He also insists that she should not enter the room, so she does not see the scene for herself. Reluctantly, she stays outside, unsure what to say next. After a moment of hesitation, Hinata suggests trying smoke signals to attract rescue teams. Minjun immediately points out how unreliable that idea is, especially since there is no guarantee any helicopters would even see it. Frustrated, Hinata suddenly shouts out loudly, calling for any survivors nearby. Minjun quickly scolds her, warning that loud noises could attract infected from surrounding buildings. After that, the two of them settle into the reality that they will have to keep surviving together in this place. Trying to shift the mood, Hinata suddenly asks about his MBTI type. Minjun replies that he has never taken the test before, which surprises her. She immediately teases him for not being active on social media or having followers. Curious, she continues asking what he enjoys in life or what his hobbies are. Minjun simply says he likes playing video games. Hinata laughs at the irony of that answer, considering they are now living through a real-life zombie scenario similar to the games he plays. Still talkative despite everything, Hinata assumes he must be introverted while she is more extroverted. She continues questioning him, asking whether he prefers planning things or acting spontaneously. Then she turns the question back on him, asking what he thinks her MBTI type might be. Minjun finds himself thinking about how Hinata never really noticed him before all of this happened. Yet now she has no one else to talk to except him, and the situation feels completely unreal to him. He sits there quietly, watching her talk and swing her leg without stopping, as if this is just another normal day. In the past, even imagining a conversation like this with her would have been enough to make him happy for weeks. Now, even with the world falling apart and danger everywhere, he is not even sure what to feel about it anymore. Annoyed at being ignored, Hinata suddenly calls him a crazy loser for spacing out right in front of her. Minjun snaps back to reality but says nothing in response. Meanwhile, the front door remains heavily secured with boxes and layers of duct tape, holding their fragile safety together. Time slowly passes, and a few days slip by inside the apartment. One afternoon, Hinata is lying on the floor, reading a book in a surprisingly relaxed way, almost as if the outside world does not exist. She suddenly calls out to Minjun, asking if he is done washing the laundry. At the same time, she complains that she is hungry again. Minjun, currently busy hand-washing clothes under candlelight, grumbles under his breath while continuing his work. Without electricity, everything has to be done manually, and it is already becoming exhausting. He even finds himself wondering if he has somehow turned into her personal servant. At this rate, she should be the one washing her own clothes. Still, the water supply is working for now, even if their food situation is becoming more serious by the day. Eventually, Minjun tells Hinata that he is going outside. She immediately tells him not to take too long and demands that he return within 30 minutes. She even warns him that if he is late again, there will be consequences. Minjun sighs, but agrees anyway. Before leaving, he approaches the reinforced glass door, which now has visible cracks and damage. Carefully, he opens it just enough to peek outside before stepping out. He explains to himself that he has been doing daily patrols around the neighborhood, always sticking to safe routes. After several days of observing the infected, he has started to understand their behavior. They seem to target only living humans. Much like zombies in games, their vision is poor, meaning they do not notice people from a distance of around 50 to 100 meters. Although this varies, he also mentions that they are extremely sensitive to sound, which makes staying quiet very important. He also observed that there are fewer of them during the daytime, roughly 2 or 3 times less than at night. It even looks like they tend to avoid bright areas and gather in shadows instead, as if sunlight affects them somehow. Because of this, he never goes out at night under any circumstances. While observing them, Minjun notices how familiar their behavior feels. It reminds him of an online game he used to play before everything collapsed. For a moment, he wonders if it is just his imagination, but the patterns are almost identical. He quickly pushes the thought away, telling himself it is probably just a coincidence. Still, a disturbing idea lingers in the back of his mind. If there really is a connection between the infected and that game, then the situation might be far worse than he originally thought. The day goes by, and the building feels strangely quiet again. The broken door still shows signs of damage, reminding them of the danger outside. Inside, Henina complains that she has already finished all her comics and is completely bored. She stares at the wall clock, frustrated by how slowly time is moving. Grumbling to herself, she complains that Minjun is late again and wonders if he is starting to ignore her advice. She even mutters that she might need to train him properly, so he stops doing whatever he wants. Suddenly, the distant sound of a helicopter echoes through the city again, but even that feels meaningless now. As the day drags on, the city outside looks calm from a distance, but the tension never truly disappears. By late afternoon, around 4:30, Henina is already pacing around the apartment, clearly worried as Minjun still has not returned. She curses him under her breath, wondering why he is taking so long this time. Over an hour and a half has already passed, and her anxiety continues to grow. Frustrated, she mutters that he only understands things after being punished and decides she will stop him from going out alone next time. As evening approaches, the sunlight fades, and the sky turns orange. Henina's worry only increases with every passing minute. She quietly hopes that Minjun is not injured or worse, that he is not coming back. The candle inside the apartment flickers as night begins to approach, and she remembers that the infected become more active after dark. Sitting in the corner, she silently begs for him to come back safely. The fear of being alone starts to overwhelm her again. Then suddenly, a sound comes from the door. Henina immediately looks up, startled. The door opens, and Minjun rushes in out of breath, calling her name and telling her to come look at something. He seems strangely shaken or confused by whatever he has discovered outside. Henina frowns and immediately scolds him, asking if he has completely lost his mind for coming back so late again. She steps forward as if ready to hit him, but Minjun quickly stops her and tells her to look at what he brought instead. He holds out a piece of paper. According to him, a helicopter dropped leaflets earlier, which is why he returned late. The moment Henina sees it, her expression changes completely. With tears forming in her eyes and a shocked look on her face, she takes the leaflet and asks what exactly it is, unable to understand what she is seeing. Yena begins reading the leaflet carefully. Her expression slowly shifts from confusion to shock, and then to clear unease. After a moment, she asks again what the warning on the leaflet actually means. The document states that the Gangbuk area will soon enter lockdown, and that immediate evacuation is required. But that location is exactly where they are. She notices that the deadline mentioned is tomorrow. Minjun then points to the back of the paper and tells her to check the safety map. On the backside, their neighborhood, Yongbok District, is marked as relatively safe, but all surrounding areas are labeled as extremely dangerous. Yena turns to him with a serious expression and warns that things could become much worse there very soon. Minjun concludes that waiting for rescue is probably the worst decision they could make. Hearing that, Yena asks if she means they should escape Gangbok immediately, unsure if that is even realistic. She remembers hearing that Weijinbu is also heavily infected and tries to figure out where the blockade line might actually be. After going through everything in his mind, Minjun decides they have no choice but to trust the information on the leaflet. He concludes that the only viable route is to cross the Han River and head south. However, when he studies the map more carefully, he realizes that Yongsun and Songdong are also marked as dangerous zones. Fortunately, there is a section that appears to be relatively safer compared to the rest. Hearing his breakdown, Han Yina looks at him in surprise. She admits she had always thought he was just an ordinary nobody, but now she realizes he is more capable than she expected. Crouched beside the table, Minjun firmly states that regardless of everything, they need to leave immediately. Han Yina immediately becomes nervous and asks if he is seriously planning to leave at night. She suggests waiting until morning, arguing that moving in the dark would only increase their chances of running into infected. She also questions whether reaching Yangkandong is even possible at all and insists that they should wait a few more days since rescue might still arrive. Hearing that, Minjun finally loses patience and calls out her name sharply. He tells her that if she wants to stay behind and risk a bad end, she is free to do so, but he will be leaving at sunrise no matter what. Yina freezes for a moment before asking if she should start packing her things and requests an extra bag. Time passes and the sun eventually rises, marking the beginning of a new day in the city. The apartment door is still heavily barricaded with boxes and tape, holding their fragile safety in place. Minjun turns to her and asks if she is ready to go. After a brief hesitation, Han Yina agrees. Just before they leave, however, Minjun pauses and asks her something else. He brings up her earlier mention of her father working at a hospital and asks if she is sure they should not go there to check on him. For a split second, Han Yina's expression changes, as if his concern touches something deeper in her. She quickly forces a smile and avoids the question, saying everything is fine and that her parents have already escaped to a shelter. She then insists again that they should leave immediately, leaving Minjun slightly confused by her reaction. Outside, sunlight filters through the buildings and tangled electrical wires above the street. Carefully, Minjun steps out first into a narrow, dirty alley marked with dark red stains on the ground. As he peeks around the corner, he immediately spots one of the infected stumbling in the distance. Quickly, Minjun gives a thumbs-up signal to Han Yina, who is right behind him. Ahead of them, the city opens up into a ruined street, an overturned ambulance sitting in the middle like a warning sign. Bodies and dark stains paint the road in silence, showing how bad things have already become outside the apartment. Carefully, Minjun and Han Yina move through the destroyed street, staying low and alert as infected wander nearby. Minjun points forward through the debris-filled path, signaling the safest direction. Han Yina nods quickly and follows without hesitation. A wider view shows the road completely blocked by a crashed bus and fallen trees, making movement even harder. The shattered bus windows are stained and broken, a harsh contrast to the stillness of the dead city around them. As they move, Minjun reflects that walking now feels easier than before. He admits he was terrified earlier and warns Han Yina to avoid dark areas at all costs. He explains that infected usually avoid bright sunlight areas, but that does not mean they are completely safe. Han Yina asks if their destination, Yangkandong, is still far away. Minjun tells her to be patient while she complains about not having a bicycle. He agrees that transport would help, but without communication or working systems, finding one is almost impossible. He even wonders where all the bicycles have disappeared to. Sweating and clearly exhausted, Han Yina suddenly asks for a 5-minute break, saying her legs are hurting badly. Minjun silently watches her for a moment before responding with a dry remark about stopping for coffee, then keeps walking. Han Yina trails behind, irritated, calling him a bastard under her breath and warning him that she will deal with him later. Minjun tells her to stay quiet so they do not attract attention. The empty city surrounds them again, only their footsteps echoing through the silence. As they continue, Han Yina repeatedly asks how much longer the journey will take. Minjun admits they still have a long way to go and tells her to hold on a little longer. She complains again, but he ignores it, focusing on the road ahead. At one point she asks for water, but Minjun refuses, saying they need to save it because it is too valuable now. Eventually, they reach a massive makeshift barricade blocking the street filled with trucks, furniture, and warning signs telling people not to enter. Minjun studies it carefully and realizes they have arrived at the Yangkandong area. He notes that the blockade suggests this place might actually be safer than the surrounding zones. Han Yina immediately brightens at the possibility of survivors and suggests they check quickly. Minjun stays cautious, thinking survivors would likely be defending the area, noticing the lack of infected nearby. Minjun begins climbing over the barricade, and tells Han Yina to stay alert. Once on the other side, Han Yina calls out to him and points toward a nearby spot, suggesting they rest there since she is exhausted. Minjun refuses immediately, which frustrates her, and she calls him out for being unreasonable. From opposite sides of the barricade, they briefly argue, tension rising between them as empty bottles roll across the ground. Han Yina suddenly lowers her head, tears forming in her eyes as she quietly apologizes for her earlier attitude. Minjun is caught off guard and does not understand why she is apologizing now. She repeats it again, her voice shaking with fear, revealing how overwhelmed she feels. Then Minjun's expression changes suddenly, and he points behind them while screaming in panic. Minjun turns sharply, his face freezing in shock. A massive horde of blood-covered infected is rushing toward them, their distorted screams echoing through the empty street. Without hesitation, Minjun grabs Han Yina's wrist tightly so they do not get separated and pulls her into a sprint. They run through the chaotic street, dodging debris as the infected close in behind them. Han Yina screams in panic, unable to believe that even this area is not safe. Ahead, they spot a man desperately trying to block an entrance, clearly a survivor. The man waves them over urgently, shouting for them to come fast. Minjun urges Han Yina towards safety and tells her to get inside, while he helps the man secure the entrance. Han Yina looks shocked as Minjun shouts for her to hide immediately. He and the survivor grab a heavy wooden shelf and push it against the entrance as a barricade. They count down and shove the shelf forward just as an infected slams into the gap. The creature snarls and thrashes violently, trying to force its way in. Its twisted face presses close to the opening, forcing Minjun to shout in panic for it to back off. The barricade shakes under pressure as the infected roars and struggles. Suddenly, the structure starts to fail, and the man yells for everyone to run. Han Yina screams for them to fall back immediately. Without hesitation, they all sprint down a narrow alley, climbing over stacked furniture as the infected close in again. At the top, Han Yina shouts that they need to jump, and Minjun agrees through gritted teeth. They leap together, landing hard on the other side. Yina immediately cries out in pain, realizing she has twisted her ankle. Minjun freezes for a moment, panic rising as the sound of approaching footsteps grows louder. Two infected appear ahead, rushing straight toward them. For a brief moment, Minjun's expression goes blank as a memory flashes through his mind, reminding him of everything he has endured. He remembers being called weak, useless, and unable to fight back. His hand slowly moves to a knife hidden in his coat. Yina watches him in shock as he grips it, unsure of what he is about to do. His breathing steadies and his fear begins to turn into something sharper. Then, just as suddenly, he stops. Instead of rushing forward, Minjun lowers the knife slightly, tension still locked in his body. Han Yina calls his name again, her voice shaking with fear. He does not answer immediately, staring at the approaching threat. In that moment, one thought settles firmly in his mind. Running away will not save him anymore, as he will not die as someone helpless again. Suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle approaching at high speed cuts through the chaos, instantly grabbing everyone's attention. A shout warns Minjun to get down, and before he can react properly, the motorcycle swerves dangerously close from behind. Caught completely off guard, Minjun's face freezes in pure shock and confusion. In the next instant, the rider swings a bat and slams it into an infected head with brutal force, sending it crashing to the ground. The attacker's friend glazes the hit, and they proceed to hit more zombies. The one with the bat laughs again, calling the impact insane and saying that things like this make everything more fun. As he turns, the rider finally notices Han Yina standing nearby with a terrified expression. He pauses for a moment, clearly recognizing her, and calls her name in surprise, asking what she is doing there. Minjun, still trying to process everything, wonders who this sudden group even is, and then realization hits him. The leader steps forward with a bat in hand, revealing himself to be none other than Park Songbin. He looks at Minjun with a mocking grin, calling him an idiot and asking why he is with Han Yina. His laugh makes the tension even worse, and Minjun instantly regrets running into the one person he wanted to avoid more than the infected themselves. Songbin notices the knife in Minjun's hand and immediately starts mocking him, asking if he really planned to fight monsters with that. He laughs again, saying Minjun is still the same weak guy trying to act tough. He then asks if this whole situation is just a coincidence, or if they actually ended up together by accident, finding it funny either way. Han Yina quickly thanks the group for saving her, admitting she would have been done for without them. Songbin shrugs it off, acting like it is nothing, and casually says he basically saved her life. Then he changes tone and invites her to join them at a safe hideout where other survivors are gathered. Han Yina says that Gangbok is about to be sealed and urges them to leave immediately. Songbin, however, says it is already too late, his tone carrying a hint of suspicion. He then offers Han Yina a ride on their motorcycle, and she agrees. Songbin then orders his two friends to ride the kickboard together, laughing like it is a joke. Han Yina looks unsure for a moment, clearly uneasy about the situation, but does not refuse anymore. One of Songbin's friends quietly asks if it is safe to bring her along. Songbin pretends to be surprised, but still agrees, brushing it off as nothing. As the group prepares to leave, Han Yina suddenly asks about Minjun, questioning how he is supposed to get around. One of the guys in the group mocks the idea and suggests they should just leave him behind, saying he will only slow them down and waste resources. He even laughs while wishing him luck surviving alone. The Batwielder cuts in and says they will take him anyway, arguing that one extra person does not matter. Minjun, however, refuses immediately. He says he is not going with them, leaving everyone momentarily stunned. He adds that he already has somewhere he needs to go. Yina looks at him with concern and calls his name in her head, her voice carrying clear worry. Minjun ignores her and turns away, beginning to walk off on his own. Songbin gets irritated at being ignored and calls out after him, reminding him of what happened last time and threatening him again. He says the world is already ruined, so nothing is stopping him anymore. He even threatens to beat Minjun down like the infected if he keeps acting tough. Minjun stops and turns slightly, staring at him with a cold, steady expression that shows no fear at all. The group gathers around, watching the tension rise. Songbin calls him a loser and tells him to come back immediately. Han Yina, shocked by the threat, asks if Songbin has lost his mind. Minjun, meanwhile, remembers clearly that Songbin has always been like this, unchanged even now. Elsewhere in a brief flashback, Songbin suggested using Han Yina as leverage for something, hinting at intentions not fully revealed. Another person hinted that he saw her photos on Instagram, asking if she looks as hot as she did in the photos, and Songbin agreed. This whole conversation sends Minjun into shock. Back on the street, Songbin suddenly changes tone, offering a fake apology for his earlier behavior in front of Han Yina, but his smile makes it clear nothing about him has truly changed as she asks him not to do it again. Minjun, with no real choice and clearly cornered, eventually agrees to go along with Songbin's group. Songbin looks at him with the calm confidence of someone who now controls the situation, acting like everything is already decided. He says it is better this way, claiming that leaving the neighborhood alone right now would be far too dangerous. Then he adds that they should first head to their hideout to rest, promising he will take them wherever they want afterwards on his bike. They begin walking through a route that quickly feels more isolated and suspicious, with silence growing heavier the further they go. Minjun, already uneasy, asks where exactly they are being taken, his instincts telling him something is wrong. He admits he has a bad feeling about the place and suspects the group outside might be planning something against both him and Han Yina. Han Yina tries to calm him down, saying Songbin has known her since elementary school and that he would not do anything to harm her. She even claims she will be fine as long as she is with them. But Minjun does not look convinced. He asks if she truly still sees Songbin as just a childhood acquaintance, pointing out that people change in situations like this. His words make Han Yina pause, her expression tightening as doubt starts to creep in. Ahead of them, Songbin walks with a bat resting on his shoulder, leading the group deeper into the empty streets. Han Yina suddenly calls out to him, and the group turns to look. She awkwardly says they are actually heading back to their place, explaining that she heard her parents are in the Siapyeong shelter and she needs to reach them immediately. Songbin is surprised by this and asks if there is really a functioning shelter in that area. He counters her claim, saying that from what he knows, the Siapyeong region was already heavily destroyed during the outbreak. Before the situation can settle, Songbin cuts in and questions why Han Yina would trust someone like Minjun over them. He suggests she should just stay with their group instead and leave tomorrow. Nervous, Han Yina tries to change the topic and insists that it is urgent and they need to leave now. She grabs Minjun's hand and tries to walk away quickly with a forced laugh, but the atmosphere turns tense as Songbin's group does not budge. Without warning, a rusty baseball bat drops into their path, blocking them completely. Songbin stares directly at Han Yina and reminds her that he already warned her. If she is going anywhere, it will only be with his group, and only tomorrow. Songbin immediately asks if something is going on between her and Han Yina, trying to understand why the tension feels so personal. Han Yina, visibly shaken, quietly mutters Songbin's name, unable to explain properly. Clenching her fist, she finally says she will go with them. Minjun, reading the situation, decides to go along for now, thinking it is safer to stay close and observe. He mentions that the sun will set soon anyway, making movement even riskier. Soon after, the group leaves and walks down a narrow alley, with Songbin still leading in front, bat in hand. They eventually reach a building under construction, surrounded by crude barricades meant to block the infected from entering. Minjun studies the structure carefully and notices it is the building he was beat up at. He also notices how rushed and unstable it looks despite the effort put into it. Yina remains visibly tense, staring at the building with unease as sweat runs down her face. He pats her on the shoulder and tells her not to worry that he won't leave her side. My God, what a bootlicker. This woman was humiliating you just 2 chapters ago. But fine, stay with me here, keep the mindset. The hungrier you are, the better the food tastes. Then something startles Hanyina, and when she looks to the side, there's a zombie in the distance staring right at her. Sanjin tells her to stop freaking out so much that she needs to relax. There's no way those zombies will get through here. But Minjin finds it strange, quite the opposite. It looks like the whole place could collapse any moment. Their base is completely surrounded by zombies on all sides. The protagonist thinks it's madness. Who builds a base in a place like this? And Sanjin says all they need to do is climb the stairs, and they'll reach the base. Minjin realizes that's how they're keeping the infected from getting in. They head up to the 2nd floor, while Sanjin calls out to Hyojin, saying he brought people with him. In the background, there's a fat guy saying, "What's this? New visitors?" Sanjin answers, "Yeah, they're from my class. You've heard of her, right? It's Hanyina." The fat man immediately lights up. "Hanyina, nice to meet you. Name's Moonhead. I mean Bongyu. 19 years old, I run several businesses around here. So why didn't you accept my friend request on Instagram?" "Yeah, Hanyina, you'll miss the day you were in that room with Minjin." Feeling uncomfortable, she says she didn't notice and wonders who this pay-headed guy is. Bongyu stands up, telling her to relax, that this place is really safe. She says she understands, but she's heard that the Gangmuk region is about to be sealed off, so staying here is risky. Bongyu replies that she's late. Roads have already been blocked, and her only chance of surviving now is to wait for rescue. But it's fine, they've got everything they need. Some tables, a place to cook, gas, everything well barricaded. Minjin is surprised these men actually managed to organize themselves this well, but he notices a group in a corner who don't seem too happy. Maybe these men stole the base from someone else. The leader then asks if Sanjin found anything, and Sanjin replies he was checking a store when he ran into them, so he didn't get the chance. Bongyu says that's fine. Bringing a girl is even better than bringing food. Now that's a win for the team. That idiot finally realizes feminism's over now. Minjin was right. She'd been tricked by Songbin, who brought her here, apparently for this man. She grabs his shoulder and says, "Songbin, we need to talk." Off to the side, she says, "Enough, stop pretending. Why won't you let me leave? I didn't know things would be like this. I hate places like this, especially with your disgusting friends around. I'm sorry, but I can't stay here like this, and I don't believe the river's blocked. I'm going to try crossing. Anyway, that's it. I'm leaving." But he grabs her arm and shouts, "You bitch, you think you're just gonna leave like that? This isn't the old world where you could get whatever you wanted." And then Minjin, in a moment like this, tries to act all righteous, stammering as he says, "I'll let her go." Songbin looks confused and says, "No way, the damn Minjin's lost his mind." The protagonist could have been smarter, grab the knife, stab him in the gut, and run. The title of Chapter 8 is Kill Everyone Except Hanyina. Then Songbin asks the protagonist, "What are you going to do if I don't stop? You going to attack me with that knife or something?" He should, but that's not what happens. The guy keeps swearing, demanding to know why Minjin froze. "Go on, pull that knife, coward." Then Bongyu shows up. "What's going on?" Songbin explains, "Nothing. Hanyina just thinks this place is a little bad since it's open air. There's nowhere proper to sleep. The fat man says, "Don't worry, she'll sleep inside the tent." Songbin adds, "That's right. But Minjin's got a knife and doesn't want to hand it over." Right away the men shout, "You dumb bastard, give it up. You out of your mind? You want to die?" The worst thing for Minjin would be losing his weapon. But there's no way he can take on 5 guys at once, so handing it over is his only option. One guy with weird hair says he better learn to listen. Bong Yu is the boss and Songbin's his second. That was the first warning. The second one means death. At that point, Bong Yu throws an arm over Hanyina and says she must be exhausted. How about some rest in the tent? But she's startled, poor thing. The fat man looks surprised that she flinched and asks if she really reacted like that. She apologizes, stating she was just caught off guard. She's on edge. He tells her to take a look at the tent. It's like a luxury camp in the apocalypse. You can go relax there. Now Hanyina realizes this persistent fat guy is a psychopath. She needs to buy time somehow. So she says actually her biggest problem is hunger. "Do you have anything to eat?" The men say that he managed to loot a butcher shop while Minjin just watches. This is the worst situation. No police, total lawlessness. The men drape their arms over Hanyina, saying how cute she is. Minjin realizes that to Hanyina, these men are more dangerous than any infected, and the fat pig won't leave her side for a second. She's in danger. He needs to find a way for them to escape here and now. The easiest plan would be to lure the zombies over, but that could put other survivors at risk. And there's no trusting those 3 older men either. Maybe once everyone's asleep, they can sneak out. But what if those bastards try something with Hanyina? It's really going to be hard to fix this situation on the second floor. A fancy meal is served, and the fat guy sits down saying he'll stay beside the princess. She yells that he smells like a pig, and the fat man looks confused. She quickly says, "No, I mean the smell of that pork you're cooking is just really strong." Then someone calls the protagonist over and tells him to take a plate to the older men. He notices right away that based on the portions, those men won't eat well. He basically got the same amount that they'd have to share. He brings over the plates and says, "I brought your food," and the old man thanks him. Later that night, with the campfire burning, the protagonist and Hanyina are sitting off to the side when someone calls her. Of course, it's the fat man, Hanyina, staring off into the distance. "Huh? Come hang out with us." She says she doesn't want to, but he insists it's time to sleep. She tells him it's fine, she'll stay there quietly, and if she falls asleep, she'll just sleep outside. Her plan is to wait until everyone's asleep and then escape. But then Banyu stands up and says, "You're acting way too cold. If I keep getting treated like this, what will people think of me?" And surprisingly, Songbin steps in to defend her. "That's enough, Banyu." But the fat guy didn't like that one bit. "Look at you, Songbin. You've lost it too. Hey Fatso, didn't you hear what I said? Get back." Then Banyu asks if that son of a gun has lost his mind. Looks like he's asking to get shot in the head. Songbin starts laughing like a maniac and says he's had enough. Ever since he got trapped with Banyu, he's been wanting to kill him. He tells the trash to go to hell because now he's the boss. The man clenches his fat hand into a fist and says he's going to end him right now. But before he can move, Songbin vanishes and suddenly has him in a chokehold, yelling that this useless pig is going to die right now. The blonde guy shouts, asking if Songbin's gone crazy, but gets hit in the skull of the bat. While Songbin keeps Banyu pinned, he orders his friend to finish the other man off. The protagonist and Hanyana are both confused, trying to understand what's going on. The men are shouting, the old folks are getting up. Right then Minjin spots his chance. He whispers to her that this is the moment. The two of them take off running while the rest of the survivors turn toward them. But Songbin yells for his men to grab that girl, and in an instant one of them throws his arm around her. When Minjin looks back, she's already restrained. The man warns him to stand still if he doesn't want to see her die. But damn, she's brave. She bites his arm hard, and while the man screams in pain, she breaks free and starts running. Then that psycho charges in, trying to stab her from behind, aiming straight for her ribs. But then, like some Marvel hero, the protagonist blocks the attack. The man demands to know what the hell this bastard thinks he's doing. He kicks Minjin in the stomach, sending him flying backward as the bloody knife clatters to the ground. Hanyana covers her face in horror, trying to see what happened, and oh my god, the protagonist really took a knife to the stomach. Yeah, he'd be asking too much for him to win against everyone right now. The poor guy is getting pummeled on the floor while Hanyana cries. Then someone grabs her arm. It's Songbin, finally revealing his true face. He tells her they've known each other since high school, but she's always acted like she's above him. He had everything she could want, unlike those losers. His family had money. He had a good body. But just because her family had a bit more, she thought she could keep rejecting him. He gives her this psychotic grin and says that tonight, she's not escaping.